Rabbi Jacobson points out correctly, we come from very different backgrounds, me and many of the people here. And yet here I've been coming so many times to the best of my abilities last few years and met so many wonderful people besides for our revered Rebbe. I've been studying Chassidus, and the very legitimate question is, why would I do that? Or why would I recommend it to everybody here, or everybody who's watching, or everybody who's not doing it? Why would I recommend it, whether it's they come to the shuir, or they study text, so that they get involved in the world of Chassidus? Whether it's especially since for me, it seemed really something foreign. It happens that my father came from a Galicianische Chassidische Stadt, but I was raised Litvish, I was raised modern Orthodox. My father never tried to put any Chassidus in the household. Sure, the Nusach HaTfilah, Nusach HaGodah, the Seder night. He was very big on speaking Hebrew. He was Mechanech, who was emphasized Ivrit B'Ivrit. I went to Yeshiva University. I was proud to go. I was able to study a bit from Rabbi Yosef Dov Soloveitchik, the great part of the Brisk dynasty, the grandson of Rabbi Chaim Brisker. And Chassidus was not promoted by, there, and yet I came and I started learning here, and I came really for a different reason, not really almost l'shem shemayim in the sense that I knew it would really draw me in, but only because my father had really recently passed away, and I didn't feel I wanted the Hasidic kind of background, the family, to disappear, so I felt I better do something. And ping, just then I saw that Rabbi Jacobson was starting the Hasidic year, and I came, and I very, very quickly got sucked in. So I think that my journey is a little bit relevant to everybody else. Otherwise, I don't want to tell my story just to hear my story, but I think it actually has a lot of relevance for the klal. Because when I started to dig deep, why was I being sucked in? I started for, not necessarily so interested in Chassidus per se, but why was I finding it so addictive, to use a word that's popular in our shir, to dig deep into my own cheshbon and nefesh, and then in thinking about it, really a lot in the last 24 hours since Rabbi Jacobson was in touch with me, I was reminded that we learned once a year, you said this, Rabbi, many times, that about 300 years ago when the Baal Shem Tov was starting to create, so to speak, the Hasidic movement and introduce it and promote it, it was in response to a specific situation then in Klal Yisrael. Yidden didn't feel that they had a real chelik in all of Yiddishkeit. They weren't learned, they were struggling for parnasa. There was the elite class, the esoteric, who knew how to learn, and for the rest of the people, they could feel disenfranchised. And the Baal Shem Tov was sensitive to this and felt he was very concerned people shouldn't feel disenfranchised. So he showed them that they too, every single Jew is part of a Chelek Elokam Imal, and everyone can have his own dveikus. So he was responding to a specific situation when Torah wasn't so widespread. But the opposite seems to be present today. The question sort of begs itself further. Now there's so much learning. There's tapes, there's videos, there's websites, there's Art Scroll in Hebrew and Yiddish and French and English. There's Torah Anytime and this site and that site. Learning is everywhere. And in terms of the worry about the challenge then in terms of persecution and struggles, sure, people in Eretz Yisrael in particular feel it every day, but it's not like it once was. So there should be less need for Chassidus now in terms of the Baal Shem Tov's original mission. So why was I finding it so helpful and sort of drawing me in? So I think the answer, as we've spoken about this many times, is because the Baal Shem Tov really turned out to be quite timeless. Because the challenges now are not the challenges of then, but they're every bit as needy in terms of Chassidus as the antidote. Whether it's technology, whether it's the fact that we're busy with work, whether it's the fact that we're more materialistic, whether it's the Baruch Hashem families are larger now and multi-generational, which wasn't the case 300 years ago, so we're busy with family. But the bottom line was, I realized as I was drawn in that I myself was succumbing to the same type of yeush that the Baal Hashem Tov was facing in his time, but for a completely different reason. Going through Yiddishkeit, but in rote, and it was creating a sense of existential anxiety or existential hollowness in my religious experience, and I think in that of many others, a certain listlessness in davening and learning. And then I heard something very, very recently from Rabbi Moshe Weinberg, who was a rav of a shul in Woodmere called Eish Kodesh, who was a Yeshiva University graduate himself, didn't grow up with Chassidus, but got very absorbed and became a tremendous mumch, an expert and teacher, a mentor, etc. And he spoke recently about when he was talking to a boy who had been in yeshiva for many years and learned, and Baba Basra, Mokam, Masechtas, and Chaim's, or Baruch Bears, and knew it cold, but was just kind of dragging, was nowhere in life, emotionally, spiritually. And he said to the boy, but you know so much, you know this, you know that. And he said to the boy, tell me, when you were learning in these high-level yeshivas, these high-powered Litvish yeshivas, did you ever stop during the Gemara and the Rebbe stop the shiur and say, I want you to think about what you're learning now, and what does that mean in terms of your relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom? The boy said, no. He says, well, what did the Rebbe say when he was teaching a Tosafos or a Chaim, whatever, about the Rebbeinu Shalom? He says, well, Hashem never came up during shiur. It was never mentioned. And I realized that there was a lot to that existential hollowness that was, despite all the learning, could somehow be somewhat pervasive. Rabbi Jacobson, in a shiur that I was just reviewing, they said last week, said a wonderful line. It was a quick line, Rabbi, that you threw out there, but it really had such an impact on me. You're talking about people who run in this shiur and this website, and we're becoming frustrated because we realize that our chitzonius and our pneumus have nothing to do with each other. I heard that line, it really rang and resonated with me. Now, is my experience relevant for everybody else? Maybe not. But I just want to repeat something Rabbi Jacobson said last week or two. He was talking about a Jew who lived years ago. He's gone already a long time. But he was a very serious Talmud Chacham. We would all be privileged to know him in terms of his lumdas. He was a real Moser Nefesh for Klal Yisrael, Moser Nefesh for Torah. And he was speaking to a colleague, and he was saying to his colleague that he's not sure that all his Mesiras Nefesh for Torah, that really he doesn't know how he's going to be judged and when it comes to the world to come, despite all his Mesiras Nefesh for Torah and everything else. So Melech, this person who was saying this, who lived years ago, was some fellow who sat in the shtibel and learned Mishnayos. All right, so what does that have to do with us? But this person was Rechanida ben Tradian. The person was Moser Nefesh, like nobody can be Moser Nefesh, as we know from our tefillos. And so Rechanida ben Tradian says that he's worried about whether his religious experience was deep enough and sincere enough and authentic enough, then I think that everybody, not just me, can see what Chassidus has to offer us. So what has it done for me over these last 2 years of studying, particularly Mamar of Baal Tanya? So I'll just divide into two categories for the point of simplicity. Chassidus has given me, in the study with Rabbi Jacobson and all the Chevra, has given me two great gifts. One is experiential and one is intellectual. An experiential gift in terms of the way I live Yiddishkeit that wasn't true 2 or 3 years ago, an intellectual gift that I didn't have 2 or 3 years ago. In the experiential realm, I see that my religious rituals are different. All of us find, I think, that davening is difficult, kavan is difficult. I certainly found my davening had been getting more stale, less focused, and now that, I can't say it's 90, 80, 70% better, but it's a little bit better. Why? Because of the tremendous insights that we have gained over the last few years about what davening really means. Not just what it means to daven and to have a relationship, but what the words mean. The words that we have studied from the Baal Tanya these last few years reshape the words of davening. They give us nuances we couldn't appreciate. We start with the brachas, and now we found out the bracha is a brecha. It's really the flow. We come in a few minutes to Klal Prat, and I used to think Klal Prat was the Midrash Torah Dreshes span, and we find out that Klal Prat has a lot to say about our relationship with the Ribono Shel Olam and mitzvahs, and we realized, come to learn that Psukei de Zimra follows a sequence in terms of building a certain mood and tension and proceeding to Birkas Kriya Shema and Kriya Shema, and Vahafta we learn is followed by V'hayu Advarim Eila, because for a very specific reason in terms of where we're going in our belief and emunah during davening. And then we learned that the noise of the malachim in Barash Gadol morphs and melts into the quiet of the Shemona Esrei. So suddenly davening takes on a new life that I and many of us just never had a few years ago. So that's what Chassidus has done for me. My davenings structurally is a different davening. And many other rituals. My tefillin, I now understand, tefillin shel yad, tefillin shel rosh, what the dynamic is, machshava, motion, midos, seichel. Who would I ever seen that? Where would I have ever known that years ago? I get a better havana of the sequence of the Yomim Tovim and in terms of a greater dynamic of Ratzov Shov between Rosh Hashanah and the end of the final days of Sukkot. So in terms of the ritualistic part of the religion, my experience has been enriched. And then in terms of the psychological and human condition, that too has been enriched. We talk about marriage. We talk about it a lot. Everybody loves when we talk about marriage. But the truth of the matter is that we get lessons that we don't even think about. we look for leadership, for ideas about marriage, how to relate to our wives. We don't have to look any further than Avram Avinu, the little story about Sarah, and he's going to say, tell him I'm the sister, and we think it's a nothing story, and it has such power in terms of what the dynamic of that conversation can teach every couple. I need to hear from a book what the marital dynamic should be like when I can learn from Avram Avinu. I'm struggling to raise a kid who's really challenging me in terms of the way he's going to go in life, and I'm going to talk to a friend over breakfast when I can look to Yitzchak and see what it meant, how he dealt with Esav and the concept of makif. These are terms that I never knew could have such an impact on me in terms of my daily challenges and struggles. Work-life balance, a big pop phrase in terms of how to balance work and life. So we come to, I think it was Romos Kel Begronim, V'cherfei Piyus B'yodam, what work is supposed to do for us. All these things that Chassidus gave to my daily experience in life. And if I have to ever rebuild, if any of us has to rebuild life from difficult times, where would we look? Well, where do you think we look? To Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, talking about Ketzim Merak and Lifnei Akala, right? The most foreign source you can imagine. But in that machlokes is our big lessons packed in on how to rebuild a life that seems in turmoil, that's dysfunctional. It's been such a great toolbox that I never really would have imagined. And the third part of the experiential realm is what I would call the inspirational realm. And this is so important. So many mamarim, to the point of what seemed to me in the past to be almost tedium, would center around the same idea of transcending the fragmentation and seeing the unity in creation and the unity with us as part of the divine symphony that we've spoken so much about, and seeing the unity of our lives. And it seemed, at one point I said to Rabbi Jacobson, again the same thing, again the same theme, the same mimer. And of course he pointed out to me that it's in the context of a completely different sedra and a completely different way it's being said. But there's an additional point, and that is that hearing it over and over, finally it starts to sink in. There's so many days that I'm struggling, whether at work or at home, and if I can take a step back and just remind myself, wait a minute, you're part of something much bigger. Go beyond yourself for a minute. Think about that unity. Think about the Chelik Ol Kamimal. What's your position in the symphony? What instrument are you playing? How does that fit into your problem just now? And it gives me tremendous chizuk. I don't know where I would have ever gotten that from. I never ever have to ask myself, well, almost never have to ask myself, okay, should I be loyal now to my wants, to my wishes, or should I be loyal to my religious obligation? Because by hearing that mamar over and over, I realize it's the same thing. And the more times I hear it, and the more mamarim we learn in Rebbe, and the more times we get the same message, the more it sinks in, the more I can acknowledge it, and I hope internalize it. And then in terms of the intellectual gift which we have gotten, or I personally have gotten, I think so many people can still get if they haven't jumped in yet. I can just only marvel at what we're learning from the Balatanya, from the Alter Rebbe, in terms of this magnificent intellectual tapestry he's created. A whole system of thought, a whole universe that who knew was there. For me, Chabad meant a place to look for food when you went on vacation, or to explain to someone in the street what was happening. You saw one of those trucks pull up. But to see there's actually a method to the madness, to use a literary term, that there's a real system of thought here. There's a real language. There's lishonos. There's terms. There's a glossary, and I don't know if the Balatanya would want to say that he created it or he just basically described it. He showed it to us. It's right there in the words of the Nevi'im, of the Ksuvim, of Tehillim, of Torah, of Mishnah, of Midrash, Gemara. It's all there al pi derech hasod. But it's like remarkable. I mean, I knew as a kid about Pardes, Prat, Pshat, Remes, Drash, Sod, but I didn't realize Sod was going to be a whole different layer that I never heard of. What we learned the last couple of weeks, about Rivka going down to bring the water up. Now, when I learned that in Chumash, that was about Rivka going down, bringing up the water, showing Eliezer how generous she was. But no, it's a whole different story. Rivka is Ravak, about animals that are tied together. And Vatayra has nothing to do with going down to water. She's going down to get into the Mayan, to the deepest accesses to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. And Kad, you think a Kad is a pitcher, which is Mr. Narish. A Kad is the 24th Sfarm of Tanakh. That's what she's going down. She's going down because they're Dvarim Gashmiim. And you think that the river that she's going to a Mayan, a Mayan is just a Mayan? No, it's not like the Nor of Gan Eden. That was a river. This is a Mayan spring. Who knew there's a whole subplot here? They talk, Lahavdil, Elif Havdalos, about the dark web under the internet there's this whole dark webs, and there's a whole story going on underneath the surface that I never knew about. And it's just remarkable. And then at one point I say, well, maybe I should ask myself, which story is the real story? Is it Rivka going down to get water for the animals? Is it Rivka teaching us about how to access the highest levels? And then, of course, the epiphany hits. They're both true, but they're the same. Like the Rebbe was saying before, they're the same. But when you get that moment when you realize that's the same, that's the ultimate. For the last couple of years, just to get personal for a minute, I've been doing a project studying Ramban al Torah every week to take a couple of Rambans and try to really tease out and work the Rambans. I do with my son who's in Yisrael. We FaceTime and try to tease out what the Yesod is in the Ramban. How many times have I come to you, Rebbe, and said, there was this Ramban, and it's not a Kabbalistic Ramban, it's a straight Ramban. I don't understand what Yesod is trying to develop, and then all of a sudden, oh my God, that was what we learned from the Balatanya Shir. It can be a Ramban in Truma, and the Balatanya can be something he said in Veschan, and I say, oh, there we go, that's the Yesod, now I got it. And those moments when you realize the unity of it all, and you realize that it's all coming together, not just us with the Ribono Shalom, but the Torah Hasod together with Torah Sanigla, that's when the whole thing gels. Those moments are the moments really of the greatest Tanug, and when they happen in our environment together with the Chevra and people of so many different strata and parts of life, it's just really, really fantastic. So as the Rebbe said, for so many of us, Yud Tes Kislev is tonight is, yes, the release of the Balatanya from captivity, of the Alter Rebbe captivity, but for us, the greater release is the one we celebrate every day. We take words that have been captured and captive on pages, obscured, long texts that were lying there in captivity and needed somebody to release them. And we have a wonderful mentor. He should live and be well and continue to guide us and to guide so many who should really jump aboard this ship so that we can continue as we've done to celebrate Yud Tes Kislev with our geula that we do every single day. Thank you for listening.